I am Brian Gorman, Managing Editor of Change Management Review. So let me begin by introducing Brad. Brad Deitzer is author of the best-selling Leading Clarity, the Breakthrough Strategy to Unleash People, Profit, and Performance. He is the president and CEO of Deitzer, an award-winning management consulting firm, and Deitzer Clarity Institute, a think tank, idea accelerator, and learning lab. Brad is the visionary behind his company, but he is also a trusted counselor and executive coach, as well as a leadership creative strategist for CEOs, board chairs, and top corporate management. Brad also speaks on clarity, organizational health, and humanizing performance. He is active in the nonprofit community, as evidenced by his firm's recognition from National Philanthropy Day, and he serves in leadership and board chair capacities for many organizations, including Young Presidents Organization. He's a graduate of the University of Texas. Welcome, Brad.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here today.
So, in our Change Management Weekly, we often include quotes around change. And this quote was in the weekly yesterday, and it just really resonated with me as I think about the conversation you, Teresa, and I had yesterday in preparation for today's webinar. It's a quote from John Doerr. "Bad companies are destroyed by crises. Good companies survive crises. Great companies improve from crisis." And clearly, the company's path is driven by the leader. So talk to us, if you will, Brad, about leaders in the crisis of disruption that we're all experiencing right now.
Yeah, I mean, that quote is so true today and throughout this pandemic. We're seeing organizations who are simply trying to survive COVID. And we talk to leaders who are trying to survive this moment in time. And our counsel to them is, if you're trying to survive the moment in time, you probably don't have a long-term future. The companies, the leaders who are looking at this moment in crisis as an opportunity to change their people, to change their trajectory, to change the future direction of their company, those are the organizations that we're seeing have the greatest amount of success. So as we think about, we have to survive the moment of crisis. Once we're past that, it's the opportunity to look forward and dream and imagine what can be.
When you talk about imagining and dreaming what can be, are there particular industries that you see leaders taking that mantle up, or is it sort of across the board, but certainly not every organization?
It's across the board. Brian, I think that it's really incumbent upon leaders to not get stuck. And that's what happened early in the pandemic. It was all about the here and now and how do we navigate this very small, this massive change. And as we look forward, the leaders who are allowing themselves the space to dream, to think big, it may be that our dreams are farther out, but we're still having the ability to think about them, to look forward. It's pretty fundamental. And so there are so many small organizations that have been birthed during this time of dislocation and change, entrepreneurial ventures. We've seen very large companies. One of the large aviation companies that we work with has taken this moment to rethink everything about the connections in their organization with their people, with their future state. Really, when we talk about this human approach to organizational change, they've started at the human level, the people level, and dream big about what their people can achieve and do in the future and how they can be connected.
When you talk about disruption in people, clearly another disruption that beyond the pandemic that has affected corporations, businesses of all sizes this year is the whole Black Lives Matter movement. And I know you have some pretty strong feelings about diversity, equity, and inclusion and how organizations address that topic. So the floor is yours.
Yeah, so we have the privilege of working with many different diverse organizations who are really trying to navigate how to affect long-term systemic change. And what we're seeing is in May 25th, or when this movement really took hold, people reacted. Companies reacted. They had to have a statement. They had to show support. They hired a DEI leader in their company. They did all the things on the surface that look good. And for some companies, it was more than just looking good and being what was on the surface. But what we're seeing is this movement and the energy around the DEI space. We're recognizing that most companies are simply compliant. It's checking the box. We know we have to do something, so we're going to do these things. And there's a checklist. There's a checklist inside organizations. But what we believe and what we found the greatest success in organizations around the concept of diversity, equity, and inclusion is really about identity. And I ask leaders the question, I say that's the most important question you can ask yourself. Is it DEI or is it ID? So DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, or is it identity? And what I would challenge leaders today, if you want to affect real change, if you want your efforts to create a more inclusive, welcoming, diverse community inside your organization, it starts with identity. Really going back to the core of our purpose, going back to the characteristics, the things that make us unique, the things that are enduring about our organizations, our values. Too many organizations got sloppy over the last couple of years. And they said, we have our values. They're up on the wall. We talk about them, but we don't live them. And so getting back to that identity, understanding the traditions that bring people together in an organization, to us is the most important and critical step in building an organization where DEI is not just a bolt-on, but it's part of the DNA. It's part of the ethos of that organization.
Thank you. While you were answering that question, Teresa Moulton joined us. So welcome, Terry. And
thank you.
We'll keep going here. Brad, one of the things that I know you work with organizations around is creating what you call a safe space for employees. What makes a safe space and what destroys a safe space in organizations?
This really centers around the idea of psychological safety. And prior to the pandemic, we were seeing, our research showed a real increase in the imbalance of fear and trust in an organization. And so it was a trend we were seeing that we believe is being exacerbated by what's happened over the last 9 months or so. And so when we talk about creating safe spaces, it's not just a space for someone to go and retreat to. It's about creating a work environment with that encourages a balance of fear and trust. So fear is not all bad or all good. It's like we talk to people in driving big trucks. If we're not careful, if we're too lackadaisical, and don't have any kind of fear, these trucks can harm or kill people. So there's a measure of fear of doing what is right, of understanding there's that tension in the organization. But the balance on the other side with trust, employee voice, and employee engagement is fundamental. And so how leaders work to calibrate um, that fear and stress on one side, and I think we talked about it the other day, some of our research is showing that there is a real increase in stress in organizations because of the disconnect, because employees are disconnected from their managers, managers are disconnected from the leaders, the human connection has been lost in some way. And so there is that, if you're thinking about this scale, that side of it, it's weighing a little bit heavier. So leaders have to be more creative in engaging the workforce, in genuinely listening to the employee's voice. We have done more assessments within organizations over the last 6 to 8 months than I remember in many, many, many years. And it's because leaders really want to hear, not at a top level what people are saying, but what they're really feeling. Tell me about the health of the organization, and then sharing it back, being open with the employees, creating that two-way dialogue and that trust that helps us to create those safe spaces.
How do you create a safe space, or what role in creating a safe space does the fact that very often employees are co-working now with spouses or partners, they're uh, caring for young children, school-age children, perhaps caring for older adults in their homes while working?
It's hard because we are balancing more today. People talk about the idea of working at home and working remotely, and a lot of people are quote unquote thriving in it. But what we're seeing is, what's simply happening is, we're erasing days. We're erasing there. It doesn't go from Monday to Tuesday to Wednesday, Thursday. Everything is connected. Every day flows into the other. We're losing the boundaries. And so part of the leader's role is to, number one, set the expectation for the outcomes they expect. The leader can no longer control the environment in which we work. We control that. But the leader can be clear about the expectations. And what we have found in our work is that the expectations are far more powerful than the environment. So when the leader sets the expectations, when the leader goes out of her way or his way to engage, to really understand what's happening, not on a business level, but on a human level, that is where we're finding the greatest connections, the greatest productivity. And it may not be. Some of the organizations we work with are tens of thousands of people. So the CEO and the leadership team can't necessarily contact each and every employee. But in many organizations, we can think about doing more than we've ever done to connect, to be kind, to be generous, to be thoughtful, to check in, or to encourage our leaders or our managers to be just a little bit more human.
As you were talking, Brad, about being clear about expectations, one of my coaching clients is the president of an international organization that she was hired to run virtually 2 years ago. And her experience with the impact of the pandemic was even those employees who were used to working virtually needed greater clarity on expectations because of the disruption in their lives. Positivity plays an important part in your work. What are the 5 factors that contribute to positivity, and why is it so important?
Positivity is so important. We talk a lot about the idea of it's hard to be happy when we are inundated with the social issues of our time, and we're inundated with the political diet, just the political angst that's happening around us, the uncertainty that's happening all around us. So people have told us, leaders that we coach and work with are saying, it's hard to be happy right now. And if I am happy, I feel bad about it. But what we have done and what our work over the past decade has shown is it's not just about being happy. When we can be positivity, there is a direct correlation between positivity and performance, organizational and individual. So really important correlation. There's a correlation between positivity and employee net promoter score and employee engagement. So for all the leaders who say positivity is soft, it's not something you can measure, we have debunked that. And we've worked, much over the past decade in developing measurements to understand and levers to change in the organization. We've also defined what positivity means, especially in the leadership and the organizational space. And so we define positivity as inspiration, mindful, happy, optimistic, and grateful. So those 5 elements, inspirational, mindful, happy, optimistic, and grateful. And so what we realize in an organization, we evaluate that. We call it the positivity quotient. And the higher the positivity quotient, the more likely it is that a leader or an organization will achieve their desired future state. But what's interesting in the organization is when you take that construct, we can realize that some days our happiness score may be a little bit lower, but our optimistic quotient may be a little bit higher. And gratitude and mindfulness, we're seeing mindfulness scores really dip right now as employees are asked to do more, as there's a swirl around all of us. So that intentionality around each of these 5 elements of positivity is core to moving the organization forward and connecting it, tethering it to its desired future state.
Other than being a role model around positivity, what can organizational leaders, and by leaders, I don't just mean the C-suite, but anyone who is supervising others, what can leaders do to help foster positivity in the organization?
I think you can break down each of those elements. I think there's things that every single day leaders can do. From a gratitude, there are programs that we help leaders process through their organization, and how do we use gratitude. There are some basic things that leaders do. At the end of every meeting, we ask people on a virtual sticky note or on a real sticky note if we're in person, to take one positive takeaway. It could have been the most challenging meeting. It could be a meeting about cutting a workforce pretty dramatically. And we still ask people to identify the positive takeaway. At the end of leadership meetings, there are exercises that we do to either express gratitude to people. So there are things that we insert in our daily routines to drive that positivity. We start meetings. There's products that we use, humanized mind maps, where it's a color-coded system to norm the brain around kind of the intention of the meeting and set that positive or that very clear expectation of what we're going to accomplish. So lots of different things, and every organization and every leader is different, but it's really being intentional, not just having that rah, we can do it, but really thinking through the idea of inspiration. And when we coach leaders, we put them in front of a mirror and ask 100 questions about, are you really inspiring? How do you inspire? How does it feel? How does it make other people feel? But inspiration, being mindful. We have a program in our company and with other clients that we work with, where we encourage multiple times a week a period of just meditation or mindfulness and breathing, and giving people that space to be the best they can be.
Thank you. Satisfaction, engagement, retention are all critical to business success. Turnover, disengagement costs the bottom line. And we know that dissatisfaction gets driven up, retention dips during big change. And now is big change for every company. What are key factors that contribute to engagement, satisfaction, retention?
So we do a lot of research in this area, and what we have found right now is that there are a couple of key factors that drive engagement and satisfaction, and they were different than I thought that they would be. You know, as leaders, we think we have the answers, and all of a sudden we listen to really smart leaders and people across the country and world, and they tell us what we know, but they tell us things that we don't really imagine on our own. And so what we've learned in some recent research is what's driving engagement and satisfaction among employees. There's three key factors. One is vision, two is leadership, and three is teamwork. And what we have found in our research is that when organizations have score on the higher level of each of those three things, the employee tends to be more engaged. The net promoter score is higher. I would also add positivity into that, because we know that is the glue that connects those. But right now, employees need hope. They need to know that there is a future. They are willing to do more than they have done before, because the workforce, look at the American workforce, it's changed. 9 months ago, you know, employees could go and do and be wherever they wanted to be. There was opportunity. Today, the workforce has shrunk in some way. And so people need to excel in their jobs. There are opportunities, don't get me wrong, but there is a focus. So they're willing to do more. They're willing to be more. They're willing to do things that are outside of their quote unquote normal authority or scope, but they need to know that the company has a vision, that it's going to survive. This is where we are going together, even if it's down the road. They need to see that pathway. So that's one element. Another element is leadership. They need to see that the leaders are present, that they are not compliant, that they are committed. And this concept of compliance and commitment is such a critical concept. So many leaders say, well, I'm doing this and I'm doing this and I'm doing this. And they are, but so often it's checking the box or it's doing it at a certain level. This is the opportunity for leaders to go farther, to push some of the things that are the normal things they do to be more visible, more engaged, more communicative, more clear about those expectations, which we talked about. So vision, leadership, and teamwork. Um, People are valuing the concept of teamwork even in that virtual environment. And so finding ways, not meeting just to meet, but finding ways to build team and build connections is fundamental to this concept. There are other factors, but our research shows that those are the three plus positivity that are giving people the connection with their organization and the connection that they have a real future.
So looking at some of the questions that came in advance, one is where you see the direction of change management and the direction of businesses in general heading in 2021.
So, I am positive about everything. I bring positivity to everything that we do. And as we've talked about, it underlies our way of thinking, our way of working. I don't believe that 2021 is going to be a fundamentally different year. I think that people keep saying, we need to, I just want 2020 to be over with. Let's get to 2021. And, my response is often the same. Like, why do we want to give away days? Why do we want to give away any day? Something great can be created, can be birthed today. So when I look at 2021, I'm not a prognosticator. I don't know what's going to happen with the vaccine, how quickly society is going to come back and create its new normal, whatever that might be. But we hear that it's still months away. Is that early summer? Is that third quarter? Or as some healthcare clients I work with say, it's really sometime in the fourth quarter that we get back to, or we get forward to that new normal. So as I think about change, I think that the most important change that's going to happen in business this year is going to be the change that leaders make in their own minds. That understanding that the platform, the environment in which we work, will maintain a constant swirl, a constant chaos. But the big change is the clarity that we as leaders bring, the stability that we bring in that chaos, and the clarity of the direction, of the connection that we make for and with our people and our company about what we're going to achieve. So I think that change management, the most critical element as we think about this upcoming year is the human element of change and understanding the impact on people. It doesn't mean that we can keep everybody. It doesn't mean that everybody's going to do the same things. It does mean that there's going to be dislocation. But understanding the human piece and connecting on that level, I tell CEOs all the time, stop writing memos, your corporate memos, because what we hear from the front lines, what we hear from managers is it's contrived, it's not real. But leaders who are vulnerable, leaders who are authentic and real, leaders who write memos, but write memos to their mom. I always tell people, write the memo and put "Dear Mom." Write your mom the memo. Explain all the difficult things that are happening to your mom, and then erase your mom and type in employees. You will see what happens with the tone, with the choice of words, with your thoughtfulness. And to me, at the core, society doesn't change, people change. We change society, people change companies. So if we get back to that very human place and think about people and think about these connections, it changes our outcomes.
I invite anyone who has questions to either unmute or throw them into the chat as we continue the conversation here. You've addressed, Brad, a number of the questions that have come in. What counsel would you give to change practitioners who are resonating with what you're saying and not seeing it with the leaders that they work with?
Yeah, the flippant answer on that is, one of my favorite lines that we tell people all the time: change the people or change the people. It's one of my favorite concepts, and I tell leaders all the time, you have one choice: change the people or change the people. And our belief is that we can change the people. But if we can't change the people, then we have to change the people and find new ones. Change practitioners don't, people aren't necessarily lining up and saying, hey, I recognize that I need to change. I recognize that I need you. And so to me, one of the things is going about the education, the conversation with clients and explaining it to them about starting from the outcome. These are the outcomes, and this is the way we're going to approach change. And then coming at it from different ways. And I think that's where we've had the most success, is sometimes recognizing that the change is the leader. Sometimes the change is the manager. Sometimes it's the change on the front line, and recognizing where the biggest impact that we can have is. There are leaders who are averse to change. Why? Because it impacts them, and they don't want that dislocation. So when we recognize that, we then shift our focus and identify other pathways in the organization. They may not be as elegant, they may not be as quick or as easy, but they're pathways to begin the journey. And what we've found is, when the leader is stuck and they give us the opportunity to work with the front line, they see progress. And even if it's incremental progress, they get to take credit for it. And the more they take credit for it, the more that they begin to own it. And so it's circular in some ways, and trying to find where the beginning of that circle is. And so it's continuing to identify places within an organization that recognize the need for and are open to change.
As you look back over the past several months, 9 months, I guess now, what has been the most difficult challenge a client has come to you with?
I'm not sure there's one. I think every client would view their challenges as the most challenging. It's incredibly challenging when you're working with an organization in a smaller community and the workforce is being cut by a very large amount because the company can't sustain it. So that's a tremendous challenge. And sometimes it's harder, and it doesn't sound very fair. Sometimes it's harder for the people who are left behind. And so the change we have to affect psychologically, that, why they're still there and the importance of continuing forward. So one challenge is just the changing workforce. Leaders who are stuck. I think that's one of the biggest challenges and frustrations. Leaders who tell us that we are only focused on navigating this time, this time. It's not a narrow time. It's It may be a 1-2 year time, um, because we see the harm that they are doing to their own careers, but more we see the harm they are doing to their organizations. And in some way we can look and see that it's not survivable, or their organizations will fundamentally be changed. And these are large organizations. Um, we've seen organizations emerge from bankruptcy, and other organizations that are really wrestling with their financial future. So those are some of the of the bigger challenges that we see, and the organizations that have been transparent, that have sounded the alarm, that have not waited and surprised their employees, but been transparent. Going back to one of our early conversations, we all have stress. We all have fear. None of us know what tomorrow is going to bring, but building that trust, building that engagement, going back to that psychological safety balance, those that have sounded the alarm and been transparent have been the ones who have been able to build, armies inside their organizations that are willing to fight and do more for their survival. And we're seeing great things. We're seeing really, really great things.
Brad, I want to sort of ask you to tie 2 points together that you've mentioned. How do you create that psychological safe space for employees as you're cutting the workforce?
I think the one is the idea of sounding the alarm. If I am, as a leader, am transparent and open, and I am willing to share with my workforce, when I do my surveys, I'm not just sharing a page back, but I'm sharing the whole of what's happening back. I'm talking through the narrative and what we're going to do. I'm beginning to build a pathway for that connection. When prior to the workforce being cut, leaders being transparent, not saying this is exactly what's going to happen and how, but to be open about the environment, to be clear that there are changes, and whatever changes that we're going to make, we're going to signal in advance. We are going to be human in how we deal with you. We are going to care for you if you're not here the way we'd care for you while you are here for that period. And really investing. So much change happens if the workforce is being cut on the employees going out. And we are huge advocates for that. But the people inside the organization who are remaining, we need to show them our compassion and what we do for the people who are leaving, so they know how much we care about people. And so there are little things that we can do. There are big things we can do to begin to build that trust, if you will, and that relationship. And the relationship's been fractured in many companies where leaders have become way too corporatized. The words aren't real. If I say it this way, they won't really know what I'm saying. Well, employees are smart, and we've got to give them credit for being smart. This is their lives. They're willing to give us a lot, but we have to be willing to give a lot back too.
Brad, could you just talk a little bit for a moment about the space you're in? Because, and I know that's actually a green screen behind you, but it is of your space. How do you get corporate leaders who are they have that corporate speak, they have that corporate think? How do you bring them to the creativity that allows them to take on the mantle that you're describing for leaders?
For some leaders, it's more of a challenge than others. But what we try to work with leaders in understanding is the traditional suite of tools that leaders have at their disposal may or may not work in today's environment. We've seen a shift over the last, couple of years in that just going to, well, I'll communicate my way out of it. Well, I'll just create a strategy to do it. It requires more. It requires something different. So the introspective, the introspective leader is someone who is looking at themselves, their teams, and identifying pathways to get to the future using different things. So the space behind me is our Clarity Institute, and it has games on the ceiling. Every wall space are games, are exercises, are floors, are exercises for human mapping. We have flashing lights. It's all part of a leadership learning system called Dimensional Leadership Learning, where we take creative inputs, creative stimuli, and distractions to break down kind of the everyday mindset of the leader, to give them the openness to explore. Leaders want to be creative. Leaders want to have space. But if you think about what's happening, our worlds are being shrunk, and we don't feel like we're allowed. We're not allowed to be creative. And so part of it is giving them permission. Our spaces in our institute, in our office, give them spaces in which to be creative. For some, like I said, it's more of a stretch. It's I'm willing to go there. As one leader said to me, you're not going to make me hold a talking stick. And I'm like, no, I'll never make you hold a talking stick. I may make you do some crazier things than that. And they all start laughing, and it breaks it down. At the end of the day, look, there's all these, fancy labels that we give ourselves: president, CEO, chairman, you name it, vice president, whatever it is. But we're people. We're human beings. We're people. The title or the mantle that we carry is leader. And as a leader, we want to do more for our organizations, for our people. And so we give people the space, the mental space, the physical space to allow them to be them, to get back to, in some cases, it's playful. In other places, it's really deep thinking. Part of it is thinking about energy. Part of it's thinking about perspective. Part of it's thinking about time, our leadership stories. We force people to tell us about their leadership journey, and people invariably tell us when they got their first job. But our leadership journey starts when we're early in elementary school, when we were the first line. So there's different ways that we help leaders break down and feel comfortable about this different exploration.
You just mentioned story, and for me, story is a critical part of any change. Story is the first language of us as human beings before we had language. We painted it on walls in the caves. How do you use story in the work you do? What role do you see it playing in leading an organization?
The stories we tell are so critical. Our ability to tell a story, to paint a picture of not just where we are, but to paint a picture of where we're going. Telling stories, some of them are personal. Some of them are to let people know that as leaders, we have hardships. So story is fundamental to leadership. I don't know of leaders who are great leaders who don't tell stories and who can't use those words to lift people up. So, we have exercises about telling stories, and I think you talked about it as well the other day, about creating a story and being in the future state and telling stories of how we got there. We have one of our exercises in our institute is an old typewriter. It's an antique typewriter that sits on the ceiling and hangs from the ceiling. And it's about it's about getting leaders to think back about their leadership journey, to think about the stories that changed, the leadership stories that changed them. So the story, the narrative is really, really important.
Yeah, when we were talking the other day, I think I mentioned that when I was in my 30s, I actually was working at the University of Minnesota and ended up in the conference room of Kurt Carlson. And Kurt had been the founder of Radisson, of Ask Mr. Foster Travel, extremely successful businessman. And we were there to discuss a working relationship between his business and the university. But over lunch, Kurt spent the entire time telling us all of the bad businesses, not all, but his business failures, the businesses he started that didn't succeed, and the lessons he learned out of that. Is that the kind of story you want a leader telling?
Sure. One of my favorite stories is, I love to tell groups my story. And part of my story was, getting fired not once, but twice in my career. Once because I worked in real estate and saved a woman from getting killed, and I was fired for getting involved with domestic dispute. I had to decide then and there, what my value system was. I got fired from a company that I was leading because the owner died and the kids wanted to do something with it. I never thought. And so telling people that story, telling people the story of working at Ringling Brothers Barnum and Bailey Circus and traveling the country, bartering circus tickets are part of the story and part of the journey that, wait, you lived your life trading for food, trading for hotel, and so those are part of the stories. They're part of what makes us us. And it gets to the individuality of each of us as leaders. And I think it's so important to find our individual stories.
You're talking about humanizing leadership.
Hey, that's an idea there.
Anyone in the audience, if you will, have any questions here for Brad? I know some of you, and I can't believe you're not asking any questions. Stephen, Juliet, Carol Ann.
We'll take any question.
Hey, Brad. Stephen May, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hey, this might be slightly off from where you've been focusing, but you can entertain it if you want to. So you have this wealth of experience with bringing people into great spaces, well-planned, co-creation, facilitated kinds of sessions. What have you learned in the last, 8 or 9 months or so about trying to get the same kinds of results when very often, and maybe never, you've been able, in recent times to bring people into that kind of space, but I'm sure you're still working towards some of those same objectives through virtual meetings. So what have you learned about trying to accomplish those kinds of goals in virtual environments?
We've learned a ton. I never thought that
I guess I'm asking for the top of the list. Yeah. I guess we need the rest of the day to get everything right.
Yeah, we've learned a lot, Stephen. I was resistant to put our workshops and our work online because I thought we'd never create the connection. And what we found is that we did a workshop it was from 8:30 in the morning until 2:30 in the afternoon for 124 people. And I was really anxious about it because we do workshops every day. I mean, pretty much every day, multiple workshops, and they range from, it can be 3 to 5 people to 30, 40 people is kind of that in that sweet spot. And so this 124 people, their feedback is they never want to go back to a live workshop. And I asked the question, I don't get it. I don't know that I want to do it that many again. And they said, it felt so intimate. And so what we try to do is create spaces. And as simple and as it is, we try to create shared spaces in terms of what we send out before. The backgrounds, we like people on the same backgrounds to, at least when I'm looking at you, we're in the same space. It gets a little bit overwhelming at times. We try to mix things up way more than we would in a face-to-face workshop. And so we will do exercises where we will use card sorting methodologies that we'll send to people. We'll sort things online. We will highlight things. We'll use annotation where they're active. And so much of our work is about being tactile. And so we try to keep that tactile kind of concept, even where you're remote. Where I can send boxes or things to people, even if they're just little simple things, to keep it, interesting, we will do that. My rules are really, really simple on our workshops. One is it's about 100% of the truth. What we talk about every day with companies is we're amazed by the fact that most strategies, most change is built on somewhere between 60 to 70% of the truth in the organization. So we really try to break down those barriers, and we do some things where people on a virtual workshop where we're all staring at each other get to send things in anonymously at the beginning, just as a release. That's one rule. Giving grace and being clear that, sometimes I will intentionally repeat something or say something, and I'll acknowledge it to people, saying, look, this is about giving grace. We're all in this new world together. So it's about 100% of the truth. It's about giving grace to people, and it's just about being present and really understanding, that I think that in March and April and in May, those workshops, you'd see people shake when their dog barked or their kid cried in the background or someone came up. And now I think that we've begun to embrace that, look, we're not pretending. We're not pretending to be where we're not. We are where we are. And so having those sessions, I'm amazed. I wish I understood the psychology behind it, but we're having so much success with these. People are not excited. I will tell you this, they are not excited when they get something on their calendar that says they're going to be in a Zoom meeting from 9 to 3. So we break down right off the bat, and we break down. And one of the products we have is called Humanized Mind Maps. It's on our website that you can just download. And during the pandemic, we did it. We put so many of our tools online. It's on braddeitzer.com, which is my site, not my company site, Deitzer.com, but the braddeitzer.com. And so sometimes we'll just do something that's fun and saying, here are these colors. This is our color. Humanized mind maps is to norm the brain around a color. So we'll do things to get them out of their space and to let them know that it's okay. I don't know if those are a few things that we're doing.
No, that's great. I appreciate you sharing it. Thank you.
Thank you.
So we're virtually at the end of our time here, Brad. Any last words that you want to share with people?
No, I just, I'm grateful for all the people in our space who are working so hard to help others create, their future. And it's work that is so important. And, people sometimes say, oh, you're the change people, or you're the consultants, or you're this, or you're that, and they label us. But I just hope that people realize that the work that we do is designed to help leaders, to help people, and that we have an incredible opportunity when we really get to that very human place to make a difference and change people's lives and change organizations. So I'm grateful to do it with y'all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And thank you all for attending.